Welcome to the Conscious Dominance Podcast, where Andrew and Eric, two dominant men in dom-sub relationships, discuss how we approach our dominant roles from a conscious and loving place, and what we learn about ourselves through the deep intimacy that these power exchange dynamics make possible. Sit back and enjoy the show. Eric, glad to be here again.
It's good to be here, my friend.
Conscious dominance number, I'm not sure, but we just keep going with these and having a good time.
Yeah, I think we're damn near 20 right here at this point, but yeah, it feels good.
Yeah. So you brought up this topic today to go kind of back into some things we've talked about before and that we've gone into on a little more surface level, but you wanted to dive back into a couple of these ideas and topics for your own reasons because of some changes that you've experienced in the application or the practicality of them, yeah?
Yes, and I specifically the necessity of inner work and like a self-reflective practice and a way in real time to, first of all, regulate your nervous system. Second of all, to assess the situation and what's occurring. And this is not an option. This is not something that's like, oh, in theory, that would be nice. It is if you want to be successful, if I want to be successful in my relationship, and I don't want it to be stuck in the eddy of depolarization, I must create a practice that allows me, when triggered, when inflamed, when I'm hearing her truth that's painful, that I, in that moment, if I can do it quickly in that moment, come back to a place, or if necessary, take myself out of the situation, get back into centeredness, and then come back to the situation. The whole point of my inner work and of my reflection is my capacity to hold her truth, the feminine voice, and to be able to then to hear that and distill that and not to take that as a directive, not to take that as a recriminating thing, or not to be defensive in this, not to ignore it, not to stonewall it, not to come back and be all defensive about it, but rather to take it in and then alchemize it and then move forward with it. The truth, her voice, you said this in a previous podcast, and it's true. The most valuable thing in your woman that will never stop is her voice. And essentially, even if she couldn't have a voice, she could write or she could communicate through technology, that will always be there. Her body is not always necessarily going to be there in the same way that you might want it to be, but her voice will be. And her voice is a wisdom. And the point as a woman gets older is that she gets more and more wise. And this is what it is to move into the stage, like a crone stage. This is the whole benefit of what it is when women go through menopause, is they gain wisdom. And if I as a man cannot hear that wisdom, or if she needs to keep figuring out how to say it in a way, contorting herself, where I feel better, I feel safe, then that's putting her in her masculine. That's putting her in the leadership role. But if she can just come right out with it and say what's upsetting her, or what she's afraid of, or whatever it might be the case, then I can hold that in that moment. What I can do is I can immediately put her in her feminine, put her in a place where she's soft, put her in a place where she's submissive and she's surrendering to me. And that's the quintessence of what we mean by the conscious dominance, because the conscious dominance is truly an inner dominance. It's an inner strength. The impact and the effect is on the outside, that there is a dominant and a surrendered submissive. But that is the result of me having done my inner work, me having done a practice that I go back and I hold myself and then come back to the situation. I have some specific stories, if you want me to get into, that I can tell you and show you in real time the transformative impact of this.
Yeah, I'd love to get into that. Before we do, right before we hit record, you were saying how this is something that you felt like you understood in concept before, but now it's landed for you in a much more visceral and kind of real way. What has that felt like to you to go through that process of the head knowledge to the experiential knowledge?
Oh, it's life changing. Rachel gives me an opportunity to literally change my reaction in my nervous system to fight, flight, threats, and how I'm able to hold myself in those situations. She's uniquely positioned, being the person that is my love, being the person that I, as a masculine, want to be able to look and feel respect from her and feel in my power with her. That if she comes at me in a way that might threaten that, or it feels in my nervous system like it's a threat to that, or in any way that her words speak to a truth about my core wound or my insecurities, what happens is it's an incredible effective tool to trigger the points of me that inflame that. And so the practice of being able to get triggered and then in real time, first of all, not react, but be able to choose how I want to respond and know, oh, wait, this is a big inflammation. I might need to go for a walk. I might need to step outside. I might need to stop this and come back at another point. And you asked me, how has this made it real time? There is no way to be able to handle Rachel or any woman that's a powerful woman speaking her truth unless you are doing your inner work, unless you are holding yourself in self reflection. Otherwise, what can happen and has happened for me is we get into this, like I said, this depolarized eddy that plays out in either two people silencing themselves or two people combating and fighting with each other, or in your head trying to work it out and then work it out and work it out and work it out.
Like
But
you
what I
can
have found,
talk about it until you
and
can,
endlessly,
yeah.
endlessly. And what I have found is that if I can work on my nervous system and come back and right energy and hold her, I literally, whatever she's bringing up is kind of irrelevant to the point. What she's testing me unconsciously or even consciously is, can I just hold that energy in that moment? Because that's my capacity to do that. There is the same capacity of another dragon coming my way, metaphorically. And will I be able to hold that so that she feels safer out in the world? And this, instead of thinking and bemoaning that as a part of the relationship, that's the point. And it literally should be happening more and more and more, because guess what? What you asked is, it's changed me. It's changed me. It's brought me into a more centeredness. It's brought me into confidence. And most importantly, it's alchemizing my pain. It's alchemizing my truth so that those pains that were there and those truths that were there, they may not ever completely go away, but they're not at all running the show anymore. They're not at all calling the shots. I'm able to honor them, see them, recognize them, accept them, and damn near embrace them as a part of me and not something that's ruling me.
Yeah. And that really is the process of any really deep conscious integration. It starts with understanding a concept, and then it moves into seeing yourself not living that concept, and then it moves into basically dipping your toe in the water and realizing what living that would actually feel like, and then starting to integrate it and recognizing that it is helpful and that it's better. It's not as scary as it sounds like or feels like it's going to be when you first hear, like, accept all of her emotions without being triggered. Fuck no, right? That at first most guys are like, fuck that. So you said you had some stories or examples. I'd love to hear a couple of those.
Yes. Well, just recently, we definitely had some opportunities to navigate some tumultuous weather. I think we've talked about on this podcast my injury that I've had in my shoulder. And we've talked about some of the other challenges that I've had. Also, some of the challenges that I've had just where in integrating myself into my professional life and other, just sort of where I fit into the whole system with between her and I and how it all kind of works out. And when she was bringing up some things that were really valid, completely valid, I reacted. I did not respond. I reacted. And my reaction was defensive. My reaction was like a composed trigger. And it wasn't me flipping off and like freaking out. It was calm, it was collected, it was this, but it was definitely I was activated. And then she kind of amped up her thing, almost calling that out. And then it became something where I continued throughout the day coming back at her with a lot of words. Like I just kind of coined this right here, but the depolarized eddy of conversation. I kept trying to fix it with her. I kept trying to send her texts. There's an interesting thing that from attachment theory where there are people that are like islands and then there are people that are more like waves, right? And or there are people that are more in flow and flux and kind of weathery, and then there are more island. And Rachel and I, she's an island. So she when she gets triggered or is impacted, she goes and isolates herself. When I get activated and triggered, I want to combat. I want to come at her. I want to talk it out. I want to like I get more needy and I get this kind of way. I can go back and forth. I forget the exact term, but I can go back and forth. But her island brings out my neediness. And so created a situation where even though I was thinking I was all in control and I was composed and I had my shit together and I felt like really proud of myself, I hadn't really done the emotional work to recognize that I was still inflamed. I was still, Rachel has this wonderful thing called the ladder through Arosha that she works with, where emotions in the red. And then as you kind of move up the yellow, we've talked about this before, orange and yellow. And this kind of also parallels with that book, conscious leadership and leading from above the line. And I think the same thing applies in a relationship like this, because as long as I'm below the line, and then I'm coming at her, even though I'm composed, even though I'm not throwing things, I'm not hitting things, I'm not angry, I'm not yelling, I'm not cussing. I'm coming at her in an energy that's needy. I'm coming at her in an energy where I'm needing her to do something so I can feel better. I'm needing her to respond in a certain way so I can feel better. And I'm sending these long texts, making these audio recordings. Well, first of all, I knew enough to not send the ones where I'm inflamed and yelling and all these, but I'm thinking I'm making so much progress by bringing her the much more articulate, cleaned up kind of version of this. And it was interesting because I got in this swirl. This lasted like a day, this is a whole day out where I'm kind of in it, stuck in it. And then by the end, she just gets bigger emotions by the end of it. And it broke me. We're pretty much that night, for the first time. I think we did it one other time in our relationship, but we slept separate. Like she was pissed, and she was just and I got pissed. I left. It was like we slept separate. Next morning, wake up, and I'm like, oh fuck. I was on me. That was completely on me that whole day. All that situation, that was on me. And I had got out of the trigger. And we spent 2 hours reflecting on what we actually went down that day. And I realized, oh my God, that energy that I had been in where I was um, trying to talk my way out of it, where I was going to her to kind of fix it, where I was looking up in the relationship books like how to fix the fucking thing. This is where most relationships go to die. Is this space where
Hmm.
it's like relationship therapy? It's like this place where the guy thinks he's doing it right, and he's doing all the right things and he's trying to fix it. And thank God for Rachel, because what did she do during this situation? Because I've told her in the past, I said, when I bring you this, don't play that game with me. Just either don't talk to me or come back me with your truth that's in an emotional, like, filled place. Boy, did she bring that to me. And I'm holding myself, holding myself, holding myself, but I'm still trying to come back at her from this energy that's needy, that's trying to prove something to her. Like, oh, I'm so good. I didn't punch a wall. I'm so good. I didn't like do this. Let's talk about it. And again, I'm still coming at her from this needy energy. Next day, it was clean. And I finally get to this place where I don't fucking care what. I didn't even know for sure if she was going to come back or where we were at. It didn't matter where she was at. She could still be feeling everything, but I didn't need anything from her anymore. I didn't need to prove anything anymore.
And then
I
everything
fully,
de-escalated, right?
and then I fully accepted my place, that it was my fault, and this whole situation, it just dissipated. It
Yep.
all went away. And we had this great conversation where I was able, it was a real conversation where I was able to own my part, and I was able to inform and be clear, but not from a needy, explanatory kind of place of what went down and then her down. It was such a wonderful kind of like teaching moment for myself and a learning moment where often when we say don't react, it's almost like, and this is why I love the ladder that she's got here, because in the red, we, and often men, we're so proud that we're not in the red anymore, that we're not reacting, that we're not getting angry, not pissed. But there's this place that's right over above the red with orange and yellow where we get needy and we're defensive, and we're not actually, as a language that she uses, where she says, we're not actually speaking from source. We're not speaking from a place that's true inner confidence. It's true inner strength. And this is the difference between where the old school dominant is trying to control her, is trying to say, hey, you need to behave a certain way or I will punish you. And what we're trying to say is we need to control ourselves, but move ourselves energetically up to another place where we become energetically indifferent to where she's at. And we are dominating the energy to a point where her energy does not affect our energy. And then that energy becomes the energy that dictates the moment. And this is exactly what we spoke about in our conversation that we had the other day about energy and coming into a room and that kind of thing. But this is why, when I said at the beginning of this podcast, the practice of self-reflection, the masculine practice, this is the emotional intelligence that's able to sift through that these different grades of what it means to not react. And then a lot of times the space of reactivity, that's where we're trying and we're needing somebody, we're being needy, and we are hoping and trying to prove our power. And we have a proving energy and needy energy. Again, both of those situations, we are hoping to gain something by our behavior from that other person and trying to please her and trying to appease her. And as long as that energy is in that situation, we're not actually the dominant one. We are actually the one that's subservient to that. On pause.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of really interesting points. And one of the things that I've had to grow through for myself has been getting to a point when I can recognize when I'm in that reactive state, because we think reactivity is just like the snap reactions, hot temper, maybe the quick defensiveness, the verbal or physical out, like lashing out, right? And that is one form of reactivity, but the neediness is another form of reactivity. And it's hard to, at first, especially, to recognize when you're in that. One of the ways that I learned how to recognize it was something that was probably 10 years ago floating around the internet, was this thing for guys talking about how to overcome what they call deering, which deer is an acronym, DEER, for defending, excusing, explaining, and rationalizing.
That's a good one.
So when I started to be able to see myself in these reactive, needy states was when I was getting defensive. When I was, because, well, here, I want to just touch on each one of those four really briefly. Defensiveness is a needy energy because you, and it's a reactive energy because you are showing her that you feel the need to defend yourself against her. You're perceiving her as a threat. So there's no way that she can ever perceive you as the dominant one when you're being defensive and defending yourself against her. Explaining is a reactive and needy energy because you are trying to justify yourself. You are trying to convince her that you are right because you're afraid of being wrong, because you're afraid of what being wrong means. It shows inner fear. If she feels you being driven by fear, she can't see you as dominant because you're not actually, to your point, you're not actually dominant. You are being submissive to the fear inside of you. You're being dominated by your own fear. Excuses, making excuses for your behavior is avoiding responsibility. That is both a reactive and needy energy because you're trying to get away with something. You're trying to avoid something. You're trying not to have the truth seen. You're trying to make excuses to get away with it. And if you're avoiding responsibility, guess what? She's not going to see you as being dominant. She's not going to see you as being in charge of your own life in a way where she feels safe to let go. And if you're rationalizing, you're looking for validation, which is a reactive and needy energy. And if you are looking for validation by rationalizing yourself and using overly rational arguments in emotional situations, she's going to see you as being driven by that need for validation and the need to be right, neediness. And when I was started to see myself in any one of those states, I could recognize I'm in one of those places where I need to do this thing you're talking about, which is that practice in real time of bringing myself back to center and not having to wait until the next day, which I did plenty of that before I started to see this, where it was a day or two or three or a week before I recognized, oh shit. But you get better at this. And you get
No,
better.
you do. I mean, I just got this morning, had a situation and I was inflamed and I just stood up. I was like, fuck, I'm inflamed. And I just turned around, breathed, came back down, and I just was like, here's what's happening inside of me. And I literally did what you said in our last podcast. I wasn't trying to explain in a way that was defensive or an overly explaining kind of way. It was just like it there's a tinge of vulnerability, but not a desire for not a performative kind of vulnerability. It was literally just like, this is what's happening right now. I'm inflamed and here's why. This is what's going on. And it's crazy how that acts as this escape valve of moving. It's counterintuitive, but the very thing that feels so vulnerable is the actual thing that's helps you to stand in your power. That with the feelings when we are inflamed and we feel really right and justified and really powerful in that inflammatory rage or whatever, that actually is the opposite of the real strength that we're talking about here, the real dominance. That's actually a time. There's a time and a place for that, but it's not usually. It's rare with your woman. Like there is a time and a place for that fight or flight reactive kind of thing, but that is not when she's pointing out some financial issues about the house or something. This is not the way that we need to respond to that situation. And so knowing that and being able to come out of that and move through that and like feeling it flush, that's the power. And that's where the self-reflection becomes really important. And the practice is you're seeing and feeling this interior happening. And that's where she can start to trust you. And that's the difference between a guy that she wants to trust and be with and a somebody that she's doesn't trust.
I've been using James Bond more and more as an
He's a good one.
example of non-reactivity
Yeah, he is. He's really good.
because you can see the stillness. And obviously
Oh
this is
yeah.
a fictional character, but it draws a really beautiful example for us of a man who can be so intensely present, and even to go through insane things that are obviously uncomfortable, like in Casino Royale. And he can he can stay present. He's not over focused on his inner experience, and that's an important part of this. We do this inner work so we can stay present with everything going on around us.
It's so we don't have to be in our inside. The inner work is there to actually clear the inside so we have
Exactly.
more spaciousness and we're not actually being ruled by the inside of us. We're actually able to have that situational awareness and be out there in the real world
Yeah.
receiving that. So exactly what you said.
And then we can do things like listen really well, or be very attentive lovers,
Hmm.
or even be particularly acute and aware of the tendency we might have to lose presence in a situation, so that we can be on guard against that, to stay present, knowing, for example, we talked a couple episodes ago about the feminine cycle. Well, Dawn is right now about to go into the luteal phase of her cycle, which is when all sorts of things start to happen and change as her hormones crash leading up to the period. And for me, I've gotten to know that in this next week, roughly, of our lives, there are going to be opportunities for me to recognize that she might do or say something that has the potential or tendency to activate something in me, to put me into one of those reactive or needy states, one of the deer, and
No,
and then just lose everything down the down the drain from that situation. So then I can be more aware of this. I can know that, especially starting, this is why we keep track of this, by the way, why it's a good idea for us as men to keep track of it. I can know that roughly Wednesday of this week through Wednesday of next week, I'm just going to wake up every morning and remind myself, yeah, just stay present and breathe and don't take anything seriously. Like, have a James Bond moment where you can just watch and observe everything that she's doing, feeling, saying, and understand the lens that it's coming through, that it's coming through a hormonal lens. Don't take it too seriously. Definitely don't take it seriously immediately. Stay in yourself. Don't lose yourself in this. I can just remind myself of that because I know that there's a pretty good chance that it's coming.
mhm. You know, this last these stories I just told you about, those all happened during the luteal phase
Of
for me.
course
So
they did.
and I even knew it was the luteal phase. I even gave myself the little speech, but the little speech, the luteal, like I'll give myself credit here, kept me from getting into the rep. Like I'm like, oh, she's the luteal. I'm thinking I'm doing so good. You know what I mean? But it still wasn't quite enough. Next time, hopefully, I have to pre-pave the way and do a little bit more of that inner James Bond in the morning just to prep myself. I think that's part of it. Is what you just said. Is sometimes you've got to go into a situation with her where you're not expecting that warmth. And I think this was part of the thing that was triggering for her, was I was coming at her needing her to be in a more feminine space and provide this sort of more of a that yeah feminine space, and she just didn't have it. And I was critical of it, and she just had none of that. Like it was like, and that was my bad for being like fully own that, my bad. And boom, she came right back at me. And that was me who even knows about this stuff and is studying, is conscious and all of that. And I still, it's a work. This is why it's great to be in an awesome relationship that's fully committed, because just like being a parent, you can keep making mistakes and then keep getting better and keep improving and keep seeing it and then the next time, the next time. And that's awesome. And so it's not to, for me, it's not to, oh, I've fucked up. It's like, oh no, let me do an action report on that. Let me write about what happened. Let me learn about that. what and reflect about that, so that next time when that comes, it's going to be better. And that time was actually better than previous times where those things were brought up. And because those things were so bad in previous times, she hadn't brought them up. And this is the problem. And this is what men think. Oh, I don't want a woman. They react in such inflamed ways that most women actually keep their mouth shut about lots of things, and lots of things that they just that are even innocuous, that aren't even that big of a deal, because their man can't handle it. And so they're actually not, and you've said this before, but they're actually not in relationship with that woman. They're in relationship with a portion of that woman, not with the true feminine spirit. Because I feel like you're in relationship with a woman's femininity to the proportion that you can hear her truth and her words. Let me say that again. You're in relationship with a woman's feminine energy to the proportion that you can hear her words, her truth,
That reminds
and
me,
hold them.
yeah, that reminds me of something that I just wrote earlier today that I'm just going to read right out of my notes here. So this will probably not come out perfectly clean, but this is like straight out of my notebook. I'm always trying to work on my own strength, not so I can be some masculine ideal, but so that I can be unoffended, non-reactive, and not triggered, because I want people to show me their real truth. And if I'm getting upset, triggered, or reactive in some way, I'm showing them that I can't handle what they're bringing me. So I'm always trying to be solid enough so that others can be whatever they are and however they are and be accepted in my presence. Someone showing me their truth is a privilege. And if I show them that I don't accept the truth of what they are experiencing, then they might not show it to me the next time.
That's Andrew. That's beautiful. Maybe you should have a podcast or an Instagram or something where you can share these ideas, because I feel like you've got some really, really beautiful
I
things to share.
should, like, maybe I should have a podcast. Dawn and I could call it Dom Sub Devotion. And we could
Yeah,
have one. We could have an Instagram account, call it like Infinite Devotion, and
that would be awesome. But
I
maybe you could write on that Infinite Devotion podcast.
yeah,
It was such eloquence that people will come to you and want to hire you or talk to you more.
that's a brilliant idea. I bet I could make a living doing that.
Yeah, maybe that can be your job. No,
So
but that is really beautifully put. I haven't thought of it that quite that way. And I really feel like you were able to articulate that in a way that really, yeah, it's really beautiful. And I think part of what I want to add to that feminine expression, it's also the woman's sexuality,
yeah,
her unleashing of her sexuality, because that part that you were just saying is you want her in her surrendered state, the overflow of that, all of her. That's where, are you able to do that to her? Are you able to do that to anyone? And then are you able for her to feel the devotion that you have to her and her to you? And then it becomes this, like, the relationship becomes a alchemizing, almost like a nuclear reactor that sort of creates more and more of the good stuff.
right, right. Because if I can't accept a part of what Dawn's experience is, if I can't accept a part of what her truth is, and when we say truth, by the way, I want to just put a couple sentences of language to this. When we say a woman's truth, I mean the truth, and we mean the truth of what she is feeling in this moment. That is the truth for her right now, and we have to accept that that is her truth in the moment. It does not mean that it is always based in deep truth. It doesn't mean that it's always factually or logically true. It's the truth of what she's feeling and experiencing in that moment. So that is what I can't reject in her, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's not logical. Chances are it doesn't make sense and it's not logical. It's not supposed to be. It's emotional. She's a feeling being, not a logical being. We make her into a logical being at the expense of her joy, her pleasure, and her sexuality. We cannot make her into a logical being without losing all of those things. So when we're talking about accepting her truth, we're meaning whatever she's feeling has to be okay to be felt. Otherwise, she's going to start questioning whether she can share what she feels with you. And when you have a woman in her head thinking about what she feels, then you have a woman who cannot be open and free in her sexuality. Period.
Right. And if you're constantly reminding her, you want to talk your way out of it, like the problem I had the other day where I got stuck in that eddy, in the language eddy, in the talking eddy. And bless her, Rachel, for not playing my game with me, and and showing that and staying in her feminine expression and staying there, and that is a practice actually that's been really powerful for us. Is that I have requested this of her, that I, when I'm inflamed and I'm in this space, like, don't get in that logical place, don't start talking, don't placate me, don't make it better for me, let me suffer. And this is what I want to talk a little bit, kind of take this a little bit and talk about the necessity of pain, the necessity of suffering, the necessity of being lonely, of struggling with this. Because what happens when in these situations is, I have, so easy, she could come and soothe me. She could come and make it feel all better. She kiss the boo boo on my head, and mommy can come make it all better for me. And like, and then she can come and this is the mom son complex
Yep.
that just is perpetuated.
It
And
will,
this is,
it'll lower the pain,
it'll lower the pain for me in the moment,
and it'll
but
depolarize the energy and
it'll depolarize the energy. And
take
this is
all of her
why,
sexuality.
exactly, and this is why she needs, by necessity, you want a man who's in his dominance and who's strong, you make him suffer. And I don't mean you make him suffer in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to make him suffer, but let's put it this way, allow him to suffer. Like, allow him. Don't come in and fix it. Let him go through his pain and his struggle. Let him find practices and watch. Is he going to go numb himself? Is he going to go to the porn and to the drugs or to the whatever to numb himself? Is he going to avoid feeling that? Is he going to distract himself? Is he going to just be obsessed with sports and all this stuff to avoid feeling the numbness and the pain of whatever was triggering him? Or can he go and sit with those feelings? Can he sit with the flush and then alchemize himself, come back stronger and with more inner confidence? That is powerful for her. But the necessity is that moment of pain. It's necessary for me to be in that pain and in that suffering. And that's where it becomes like a shamanic experience. It has the potential where there can be some really deep excavation that can take place in me when I'm able to hold myself in that. And that's where I can really hold and sit with my pain. And my pain becomes a teacher for me. And the pain could be long term that I see and I sit with. And it's been really interesting lately for me to be and witness the pain, shoulder pain, other pain that I've been having, and just be like, oh, you're there. And not avoid it, and just be gentle with it, and sit and let it sit in the sidecar with me. And yet drive where I need to go and show up with her where, yeah, an acknowledgement, not necessarily out loud, but to myself, that I have this pain. Consider those things, but I'm not ruled by those things. I'm not trying to flex. You know, those guys that sit and they puff their arms out a little bit to make their muscles look a little bigger. Am I trying to prove myself by being so tough? Am I trying to dominate in this sort of way that's all over? Or am I coming at her in this, like you said, James Bond kind of stillness, a stillness that she can see and hold, that there's a gravitas, and it feels to her like something that can hold her nature, can hold her expression, that he can hold his pain. If he can hold his pain, he can hold her pain.
This is how I tell women that you can create your own safety. You help to build your own safety when you don't protect a man from how you feel in response to him. Don't protect him from how you feel. You're actually hurting yourself as a woman. You're hurting yourself when you shut down and don't share how you feel because you're afraid it might hurt him. He needs to feel how he's hurt you. Like, I need to feel how my actions hurt Dawn. You need to feel how your actions hurt Rachel. That's the only way that
It's
you.
just like, yeah, for sure. It's like if you're playing a sport and you mess up, like you got to suffer a little. I mean, you got to feel the impact of
Mhm.
it, you know? Like, and this is where, you know, ultimately, like in the biggest, most gravity kind of way, there's life and death situations where when you mess up, people die. And it's not necessarily this, but it is this. Because if you go out into public and you mess up and you're emotional and you're this like this and you do whatever, you have car road rage and you're like racing the guy next to you, you know, I've done that before. Like I'm guilty of that, where some guy's being an asshole, so I'm gonna be like not let him in, and I pull this shit. She looks at me and she's like, I'm like, oh fuck, there I go, proving myself, being in the and but that's literally it's dangerous. Like that kind of reactivity, that triggered state, like this is not something that casual. Like and it's more and more important. And that's why to all the women out there, stop placating, stop lying, stop keeping your mouth shut. Speak, use your voice.
Mhm.
If he's a man, and he wants to be at all a dominant space, he'll he might react. It might suck. You might ruin the moment. You might ruin the days. It might take weeks, months. But if you love him, he'll get better. He'll get better. He'll get better. You'll get better. And it's a process. I mean, this is not overnight. It's not something that it's like anything. You have to practice it. And it can only happen. You can only practice this by doing this. Like you can't go and it's not the same as having someone else speak their truth. It's the woman, it's your woman loving you speaking of truth. That's a very different experience for me than somebody like at work yelling at me or somewhere else. Those are different. And it's for men that it's your woman that's the most triggering. If you're a masculine, it's the feminine that you love and respect the most that's speaking a truth about how you're not showing up or that you're not actually, for her to tell me that I haven't been in my stepping up to my responsibilities, that I haven't been able to be in a space of responding, been reactive, that I've been proving that I've done, that I have been guilty of the very things that I claim to be on this podcast and that I claim to be, she will call me out when I'm out of my integrity. That's what I want. I tell her to do that because then I can trust that when she's telling me, God damn, I respect you, I love you, it's the truth. And you can only trust the truth when someone tells you the truth. Yeah, let me say it this way: you can only trust the truth of the good stuff if someone can tell you the truth of the bad stuff or the difficult stuff. Otherwise, their truth is just placating. It's just it's just trying to make you feel better in a way that's full of shit.
You want to talk about some of the most powerful expressions of love that I've ever received from Dawn. They are these things when she comes to me and, for example, thanked me for being so patient with her when she recognized how much hell I went through, basically just holding myself together for all of those years when she was completely unconscious and shut down and numbed out and in a survival mode, fight or flight for years. And when she recognized that and saw how much patience I had to have to stick by her side, to hold out for something better and for something better between us. And when she saw that and was able to come to me and say, you know what? Thank you. Other times when she's been able to come to me in response to being able to hold this kind of strength that I've had to work my ass off to develop. When it impacts her in a way, when she's just struck by gratitude that brings her to tears for how much she appreciates me, there is no feeling like that on the face of the planet.
Oh, it's the best.
Eric, you mentioned practices, specific practices that you use when you find yourself in these moments. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what is it that we do when we find ourselves in these moments of maybe either noticing that we're getting activated or when we know that we might, to try to avoid getting activated in the first place. What do you do in those moments when you, especially when you catch yourself maybe already in the reaction,
Yeah,
to nip it?
to nip it. I mean, none of what I'm about to tell you is original. So I'll just tell you what I do and what works for me. And I
Yeah.
think the most obvious one and the most important one is actually breathing. So for me, really being able to have some sort of breathing practice, and it can be, don't overly complicate it. Like literally just slowing down my breathing, just taking deep breaths, holding my breath, just bringing awareness to my breath is massive, massively important. The other thing is take my energy when I feel myself all up here like this. Oh, I even do that on the podcast sometimes. Oh, up here like this, and I get excited on my head. Bring my energy down into my cock, down into this other area. If I can just literally feel like, where's my fire? Is it down here or is it up here? Like bringing that energy and like really, and like just even just doing some little cock twitches that just like feel the energy, feel your chi, like let that be where it rests and where it sits. So those two things, and then another big one for me is if I'm really getting inflamed and I need to check out for a moment. I live fortunately in a place where from my house I have trails of nature that are all around it. I can literally walk out and get on a trail for hours. It's an amazing place to live where I'm so privileged. And I have that is a practice that I do daily, regardless if I'm triggered. But if I'm upset anytime, and I'm really upset, I just immediately hit the trails. And I immediately, so being in nature for me, and I think what that nature does for me is, especially when I'm in a place where I can't go to Rachel to soothe me or to comfort me or to be in any sort of place because I'm in that needy energy. I can bring my neediness to nature. I bring my neediness, I bring my like proving, I bring it all there. And I'm able to I put a little headphone and I often will make recordings on my phone, like someone gives a fuck, someone out there, but it's just my little phone thing, and I'll just bitch, I'll just go for a walk, and people think I'm crazy, but it's all right because it's not that very crowded of a trail. But I'll just talk and kind of release this charge, and just kind of be a bitch, whine, and just cry, like let out all my complaining stuff, and then it's just kind of like out, and I'm like, okay, somebody heard me. But it's not, I'm never going to send it to anyone. And then I go back and I literally delete it. Lately, I've been kind of keeping it because I'm interested, reminding myself, oh my God, like, because it sounds like I don't relate to that person. And I think it's really important for me to see that when I'm triggered and I'm in that state, that's actually not someone that I want to trust. That's not someone who's thinking clearly. So, definitely what I have learned very much to do is I'm not going to go and try to make big decisions or interact. And I should not interact with her lately, like conversation where I got a little like, oh, I'm good enough, I can start interacting with her. No, don't. So I think that the
Just
the
no.
breathing thing is really important. Moving the energy down into my middle region, the cock energy, important. And then I think being in nature is really important. And then lastly, another thing that's really helpful for me is writing. So I've used writing a lot, and I've used writing to reflect on later. I've also used writing when I'm really angry, and I'm like, that part of me when I'm like that day, for example, when I was sending all this text to her, I should have just gone and written all that text and then not sent it to her. Like I should have just wrote that all out because I'm in my head and I'm in this kind of energy that's there. But you're literally all of these practices are a way for me to be with my feminine and my feminine energy, my inner feminine, and be able to hold that and have a confinement for that. And so I have another thing that I do, which is kind of like you have interval trainings where you do, when you like a time and then you work out and then another time. I'll do the same thing with my writing. So I'll say I'm going to write for 20 minutes, 750 words in that 20 minutes. And that's a pretty good amount of time to write 750 words where you can't stop. And it just forces me to get that out there and do that. And then when I'm done with that, I feel like I've accomplished something, and I'll do that. And then also I have a whole little practice I can get into later that's a little more complex about that I don't want to take this time to do. But that sort of commitment, it's not just like random writing. It's like I go in, I've got 20 minutes, I'm going to do 750 words. So you bring a little structure, and the same thing with the walk. I'll go out for 20 minutes out, come back 20 minutes, or if I only got 20 minutes, I'll go out 10 minutes, come out 10 minutes. So I bring a little bit of a container to these, or the breathing I'll count. But when I can bring a little bit of a form to those things, I'm not just sort of flailing all the fuck
Mhm.
around. That's really helpful. And I find time is a really helpful way to bring a container.
Yes. Everything you said, I would fully endorse, because what you're talking about here are embodiment practices, grounding practices, and creating structure out of chaos, creating structure to contain chaos. Like, it is the basis of masculine expression. And what you're doing is recognizing yourself. When we're in a triggered state, we are in a feminine expression. We're inverted in our own polarity. We need to bring ourselves back into our true polarity that's in alignment with our core, with our essence, which means we need to uninvert ourselves, which starts by accepting the fact that we are where we are. And so I do similar of all of the same things. I would say the only thing that I do a little bit differently is the writing is where I go first. I will always sit down with my journal and write. And at first, I will always do that uncontained, because it just needs to get everything that's spinning in here. It just all needs to get out. And one of the things that I will do is I will go get a workout in. I'll go move my body and work.
Yeah. Before I injured myself, I was working. That was, yes, I agree with you completely.
Breathing, all of this, really what it accounts to, or what it all comes back to, is we have to get back into our bodies. We got to get out of our heads. We got to get out of our feels and back into and settled into our bodies. One of the things that I really love is this concept of the pause.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to see in those moments when, like, she just said something and I'm about to go, oh, fuck, that's one of the classic little reactions that we don't realize is a reaction that gives
Right.
away our triggered state, is just the little scoff, the little eye roll, the little, even internal, just even if you don't let it out, you just feel it, like, oh, fuck, this fucking shit again. Any of those little things inside of your own head or in your inner voice show you that you've already lost containment of yourself. You've already lost your inner dominance by the time that oh fuck, here we go again comes out, or the eye roll or the scoff or whatever. You're already in the reactive, triggered, and therefore needy state. So being able to be present enough, and this is why I work every single morning with a meditation practice that is aimed at helping me be present with the reality of what I'm doing. It's like pre-practicing so that I can be present with the reality of every moment. That's my objective, so that when she says something and I feel that little coming on, I can just pause just long enough to recognize that it's coming, and then maybe choose something else. Like, I'm going to look at that later. And if I can do that, and I try to amuse myself with it, honestly, because there's something about being in a situation where maybe your woman expects you to be triggered, or maybe she's even testing you to see if she'll trigger you, and you just go, you little smirk on your face, not today. Mm-mm. Not playing with you. You don't say that. Just the smirk on your face. You say, I'm going to go grab a drink of water. Do you want an ice cube down your shirt? Whatever. We should do an episode on feminine testing and handling and passing tests. That would be a great conversation. That's not for today and how we handle those tests, but that's a couple of the ways that I handle those things. just getting to a point of being present enough to recognize and to be able to take that breath, have that 1 or 2 seconds to be amused with the fact that this is happening rather than upset that it's happening.
I think that's excellent, and that we can start practicing that all day, every day, in any situation with anyone, not just our women. Anytime that we're starting to feel a little bit of that reactivity or that inflamed space,
Yeah.
to be
How,
able to take that pause.
how about when you drop something and you go, ah, motherfucker? Or something like hits your finger and your reaction is, ah, god damn. Can you be present enough to see that thing happen and not react, to see the thing drop, to feel the pain in your finger without reacting? Those are the little practice moments that'll help you make this possible in all the other moments. Can you hit your finger and go, fuck, that hurt? And do it in a way where you can be present with it rather than reactive to it. If you can build that skill, you can be a ninja with this stuff. But we're so conditioned to have that quick twitch reaction to things not going how we think they're going to go or how we want them to go.
That's so true. It is. And that's why it's a practice. It's not something necessarily that we're good at, but we can get better at,
Absolutely, we can.
for
And
sure.
you will.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you will. And you're experiencing that right now. You're experiencing the evolution of getting better at it. So am I.
Yeah.
It's just a practice. I've been practicing a little longer than you have, but it's like we just keep getting better and better and better. And this is the path to untriggerable or to
It's true.
non-reactive.
I come from a long line of Irish tempers. My grandfather had a temper to of all tempers. And a lot of people say that I'm a lot like him, which is an honor to be like him. But my temper when I was a kid, oh my God, it was embarrassing how bad it was. I literally couldn't play sports. I got kicked off of teams. I've told these things before, but it was just so bad. And I completely stopped whole swaths of my life because I didn't trust myself. And I think I might have mentioned on this podcast before, but I've been fired from at least 3 different jobs because of my temper, from being triggered and inflamed. So it is definitely something that I have had to work through. And in my previous relationships, I mean, they were just a constant state of being in the triggered. And to the point now where when I'm not in the red, I can feel that, and I'm not in this extreme place over here in the red, but I'm just moving. I can honor and be like, oh, that day, the other day that I'm saying is so bad, that actually was progress. But it helped me to see, oh, it's still not enough. And I think part of the practice that we are offering and that we speak about is an excellence. It's a meticulousness. It's a craft where you know that there's always possibility to get better and better and better. And you will feel that because the result is your woman in a certain feminine state that's lovely. And your energy being able to be strong and confident,
Yeah. It,
even in this midst of situations that don't seem like they offer that.
to me, it's really a pursuit of excellence in relating. It's a pursuit of excellence in leading.
Mm-hmm.
And a, an artist versus a scientist.
It's true. It's a craft and a craft.
Yeah, craftsmanship is a great analogy to this because you think about woodworking, right? Like you can
Right.
always learn another skill. You can practice more. You can,
Right.
like, if you're carving or a sculptor or any of these, anything that takes craftsmanship, you can know how to do it, but then you can just continue to get better and better and better. And that's really what I call men to here is invest in being the best that you can possibly be and then continue to improve yourself from there. Why not? It only results in more fun, more like feeling more solid and strong for yourself, having more sex with your woman, having her love and appreciate you more, having more confidence in yourself, feeling worth like it. Only good stuff comes from this.
Right.
It's just going to hurt to get there.
Well, it's just like any craft. When you're doing true craft, there's always these moments that we might call dips. You know, there are these moments that I think Seth Godin is the one he talks about this, but this like dip where that happens again and again, and where you start to get good, and then you feel good about it, and then you're like, oh, it gets really hard, and then you get better, and then you get hard, and then it gets better. These cycles come in and out where, and a lot of that when it's really hard is your ego dying, or my ego, and I don't feel like you can have a true ego death without it being painful. I mean, that's when you know that the ego's dying, is there's this pain that you're able to sit with and hold. And I think you can have, my experience is that the ego dissolving and the ego death comes from when I can simultaneously feel the pain and then love the pain, love myself, love, be compassionate, be gentle to that. If I'm always at war with the pain, I'm not actually allowing that ego death to occur. I get sort of stuck in a place. I think a lot of guys get stuck where it's almost they get petrified, and yet they come off really tough, but they're really just scared, and they're using their toughness to block off the part of them where that ego is being fractured, and they're scared to death because that ego has held them together. But they don't realize on the other side of that ego death is the spaciousness, which can afford them the inner strength that allows them to be, as you call it, the James Bond, or these moments of true equilibrium, a true spaciousness where she can feel that, that's not triggerable, that's in response and not in reactivity.
Beautiful place to wrap this conversation up. I think you summed it up excellently there. Thank you again, as always. Look forward to this every week, and I look forward to it again next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.